So, first of all, Guy, thank you for coming on again. And we do appreciate that. We really do. Now, I'm going to let you explain because, you did mention me where you were and we said it's Cambodia. But first of all, can you tell us where you are and why you're there?
Okay, so I've been on the travel for like the last 3 months. Um, Let me start off. So I was in Australia. I got a pass to attend COP28, the big climate conference in Dubai. So I was there for a week. Then I was 4 weeks in the UK. I had family over Christmas. And then on the way back to Australia, I figured I'd come back through Cambodia to visit Angkor Wat, which is the big temple complex, the headquarters of the capital of the Khmer Empire. And when I got here, I found it was actually quite inexpensive to rent a property, so I rented. So I'm here. I've got 2 months here, and while I'm here, I'm writing a book. Thank you. You get
Okay.
that?
Yes, we're good. I just somebody's telling me I'm echoing, so I have to be really careful here. Okay, 1 second.
Guy, what the new book you're working on? Can you reveal what it is and what it's going to be about?
Yeah, yeah. So over the last 3.5 years, I've been working pretty much full time, and this is without pay. I just stepped away from like earning money and just lived cheap in order to devote my thoughts to this idea that the climate and ecological crisis, at the heart of the climate and ecological crisis, is an absence of meaning in Western culture, but culture around the world. Not an absence of meaning, but an inappropriateness of meaning. And so I've been sort of approaching climate and ecological crisis through the lens of worldview and belief and spirituality and philosophy. And and trying to find words to put all that together so it makes sense. You can just convey it to regular people. And what I've done is I've created an organization called Vita Sapien organization. Vita Sapien is Latin for Lifewise, and and there is a philosophy in Vita Sapien organization called Lifewise philosophy. And the idea is that it helps us become wise about our own lives and wise about our place amongst life on earth. And I've been plotting this and doing various parts of this over the last 3.5 years. But now I've got the opportunity to actually just sit down and write the book about it. And it's going to be called the Lifewise Philosophy Book or words like that.
Guy, if I may ask you, and I've never thought of coming out from this angle, but when you were very young, when you were a kid, was there any inkling that you were going to be this type of person traveling the world, being involved with issues such as environmentalism? Is there any connection to the past, or is there some moment in your life where the light went on and said, I'm going to throw this away, I'm going to do this?
Um, in terms of being somebody who travels a lot, then I did my first air flight at the age of 9 weeks old,
Hmm.
and it wasn't short haul. It was from London to Melbourne in Australia. Um, and apparently they put me in a bassinet in the overhead locker compartment, in the storage locker. Um, and I've been moving ever since. Actually, I'm rootless in many respects, content but largely rootless. Um, as for the the environmental work, which is such a big part of my life, I explore this in the book. In fact, the opening chapter of the book talks about a time when I was sailing on my yacht. I had a 34-foot yacht sailing up the Queensland coast on this beautiful starry night. Like it was full star filled that night. And a bird landed on the deck of the boat, a brown booby bird, Sura Lukagasta. And it sat on the bow of the boat, looked around for a while, checked me out, thought that I was safe, put its head under its wing and went to sleep. And I was its guardian. And
Hmm.
I think that was one of the moments in my life when I realized that just how profound and extraordinary life on Earth, on this planet is, and how we're all intimately connected with it. There's fundamentally no difference between me and the booby bird. You know, we both come from the same place. We've both got the same reasons for being, and that so back then, I mean, that was back in 1990, whenever, and um, I didn't have an inkling of this. I had like these little instances crept up through my life over the years. But what really triggered off this Vita Sapien organization and the Lifewise philosophy book was a realization back in 2015 or 2016 that if you actually look across the world's religions and philosophies that are adopted, particularly in the West, there's practically no reference anywhere in the spiritual philosophies, um, even in the non-spiritual philosophies like Buddhism and Stoicism, practically nothing of use to deal with the climate and ecological crisis. And that was my insight, and particularly in New Age religion, for example. So that was really my insight, was that there was a piece of work that was missing, and I couldn't find anything like what I had in mind, so I've just been building it over the last 3 years.
If anything, Guy, I assume you might agree with me that the Abrahamic religions, like with Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, there is this idea of dominion over the earth, and it kind of is counterintuitive if you want to have a sustainable planet, and
Yeah.
that's a tough road to go given the world that it is today, because you have this tribalism, so to speak, this divided world, but they're all together in that one idea of dominion over the earth. Now, they may argue about who should have dominion over it, but it seems to me, as a person who's a vegetarian myself, that the animals got the wrong end of the stick. And not only that, this what was a beautiful planet is as you said, it's being destroyed. It's sick. So how do you get beyond that? I mean, I think maybe that's the whole point of maybe your religion, so to speak.
Yeah, so I actually, my neighbor in the apartment complex while I'm staying, had a coffee with him the other day. He bought his King James Bible with me, and boy, did I get an earful. But one thing we talked about was the opening chapter of Genesis, where God made the earth supposedly, and then brought in all the animals and plants, and then brought Adam in. But Adam's instructions were threefold. The first one was to dress, and the second was to keep the garden. And my Christian friend told me that to dress means basically to prune and maintain from within, and keep means to put a fence around and protect from external forces. So in a way, the actual opening statement of the Bible says, look after the garden. Now, if we would extend the Garden of Eden to the global ecosystem, you can see a global religion that has its foundations in the right place. One of the problems, though, is that it's not a particularly large part of the Bible, and it's not a theme that's actually referred to a great deal thereafter. So it doesn't really sort of ring out as an
Hmm.
ecologically sustainable belief system. And secondly, the very concept that there was a God creature that plonked the humans into the pre-made garden just creates this enormous separation between humans and the living planet, which is
Right.
actually at the very heart of the climate and ecological crisis.
Hmm.
And just to reframe or to frame, for example, indigenous worldview, like if there was a scene with a forest and an indigenous people, the indigenous people are a part of the forest, whereas the Western people would see themselves as apart from the forest. And that's really at the very heart of the problem, is that we don't identify with moral concern for the global ecosystem, which is insane because it is our life support system. And that's really what I'm trying to get to with my work, is just to try and pull that argument apart and just put some ideas out that create an alternative model, not with the view that Christians don't become Christians anymore, they become vegans, but with the view that we can bring some Vita philosophy into practicing Christians to help them improve their ecological spirituality. And that might include looking for the parts in the holy books that actually resonate with Vita. And there's work that's been done around that
Hmm.
already.
Guy, I'm wondering. I mean, you've been involved with this for so many years at a very high level. If you had to pick the two or three, or you can have any number you want, biggest hindrances or detriments to a view that, I mean, I think it's common sense, but a lot of people don't. If you don't protect your Earth, you have nowhere to live. I mean, it's just that simple. So, what's keeping people from arriving at that in your mind?
Um, I hold that what we believe is a much greater motivator of behaviour than what we know. And so on the surface of it, we've got a lot of people that have a rational understanding of climate science, and they go, "Well, that's spooky. We shouldn't do that." But what they actually believe underneath, the little haggle of beliefs that lives inside of us, is a matrix of Christianity and capitalism and consumerism and wealth creation and a whole bunch of other things which are motivators and drivers for them. And what's missing in there is the belief that we're all part of this super organism that lives on the planet and that we ought to nurture and protect her. And so the work that I've been doing is unique because it actually looks specifically at that in the context of late Anthropocene collapse issues and tries to tease out how we use that belief motivation to actually transform our behavior so that we become proactive environmental behavior change is what we're looking for.
Now, thank you, Dave. If you want. Well, what I wanted to ask you, Guy, because I want to make sure everybody out there clearly understands where you're coming from. With Vita Sapien, you never have or not espousing that there's this supernatural deity. You're just saying that you're looking at the planet as almost as like an organism within itself that's we're a part of. But again, you're not pushing a god on anybody per se.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So Lifewise philosophy is secular, which is to say that it doesn't have a religious connotation. But within Lifewise philosophy, there are two little sections that if you put them together, it forms the basis of a religion. And Vita Sapien organization is actually a registered religious institution. So the original conception of what is now Vita Sapien was a religion devoted to Gaia. And Gaia is this idea that all the living creatures on the planet behave in the manner of a single organism, in that they are the ones that are actually regulating the climate and the temperature of the planet. So when I went through the process of forming the religion, I had to address an issue, was that the definition of religion that I was using was a belief in a supernatural. And a supernatural is by definition beyond science and beyond proof. And Gaia is a scientific theory. And this is why I came up with a new conception called Vitae Planeta. And Vitae Planeta basically sees all the living creatures on the planet, including the humans, as a single superorganism, a single living being. And when you frame your understanding of the world in that way, it helps you understand that we are the cells in the greater body, that we have a responsibility to the host. Now, for some people that find that all a little bit weird or they don't like the word religion, that's okay, because it's just one small part of the broader philosophy.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting, Dave. Go ahead, Dave.
Go ahead, Brian. No, you.
Well, I was just saying, I just received my results, Guy and Dave, for my DNA. I did the ancestry thing. Well, not 23andMe.
Were you human?
Well, I'll say this: I shared.
I'll
DNA
tell you,
with
if you
the
came
tree.
back, if you came back human, I get a retest.
Okay, but the interesting thing is that we share something like 99.5% of DNA anyway of a living organism, and even we do share things with trees, so to speak, and we came from one cell. So as much as somebody who's listening to this might say, okay, well, that's a little bit different, there is a certain scientific basis in DNA for this. I was shocked. For example, I saw that I was 2% Northern African, and
you know how upset
10% British.
Do you understand how upset they are in Northern Africa right now when they found that out? They want to disown you completely.
But to me, I'm an atheist guy, of course, but there is something, I don't want to say spiritual, but I had that almost spiritual feeling when I looked at the results and saying, this is real data. And I'm seeing a
Mm-hmm.
connection that I never would have seen if I just assumed things. And then you could even
Yeah,
look back.
yeah.
I thought, relatives in London, relatives in Siberia, and maybe Mongolia. So maybe it isn't so odd to have a place in our logic saying, maybe there is this connection.
Mm. Well, I mean, there is. I mean, it's not even debatable anymore. I mean, what you just described is your relationship to human forebears, and you also described how some of the genes that we share, like 99 whatever it is percent genes with common chimpanzees and
Right.
pygmy chimpanzees. I mean, this is not something you argue about anymore. I mean, the analysis of these of DNA and mitochondrial DNA is extremely thorough and sophisticated, and you get all the fossil record. I mean, this is just established. The question is whether we hold ourselves, whether we believe that we're a part of nature. Like I'm saying, there's a distinction between what we rationally think and what we believe, and it's beliefs that motivate us. So you could have a scientist who looks at this information and goes, "Yes, I get it," but who's a Christian, but who's actually driven by his actions are actually guided by the belief that he was plonked here by the God creature. And this is why again Vita Sapien is unique because it approaches this whole Anthropocene collapse problem through the lens of spirituality, through the lens of belief, through the lens of philosophy and worldview. Um, did you have any Neanderthal genes in your?
Yes, I do. I have
Um,
221 Neanderthal genes,
right.
and I think I have more Neanderthal genes than 23% of my group, but not like some people have
Doesn't
90% more.
doesn't surprise me at all.
Okay, but they said that. But what is
Yeah.
interesting, gentlemen, is that they said that some traits that Neanderthals have, the genetic traits, one would be that I have a hard time putting things away, and that's true. I like right in front of me. There's a lot of things on the desk that I have to see. I can't put anything away, or not such
That's
a
called
great
being
sense of smell.
slovenly.
Slovenly, right? Okay,
Yeah,
but
so
but
don't try to hide behind genes on that. You're
oh, no, no,
just
no, 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 no!
you're
You don't know that.
disrespectful.
You
You're
don't know that.
disrespectful to your office
Okay,
environment.
but it makes sense. Well, look, I was speaking with somebody who used to work for the Gamaliel Institute in Russia. He's now in the United States. He told me that in China, 1 in every 7 people have Genghis Khan's DNA. So there is a connection, even to the past, and even a political connection. I don't want to get into politics now, but that authoritarianism of Genghis Khan has been around since 800 or whenever in China and in Russia. So it doesn't necessarily leave you. And there is that connection with the past to the
Mm,
present. And it's
mm,
there in my DNA. And I'm certainly not the only one.
You know what? That makes me think of something. I mean, you know, I think again, my take on the broad spectrum of humanity is it's not really good at looking and really understanding the past and learning from it, and it not real good about looking to the future. And I think some of that comes from us, and more so in modern times. It's the immediacy. The immediacy. We'll get through today. Well, I'll make money today. I'll do this, and not without any really, forethought. So my question, Guy, to you is, we're talking some high level stuff tonight, but what would you suggest someone who just feels overwhelmed by this but knows there's something wrong with the environmental picture in the world? What are some small things they can do? One, of course, we'll sell your book. I mean, read your book and change philosophy. But steps prior to that, what's some, a normal person, whatever that is, can do? Do you have any suggestions for them?
well, I mean, the first way to start would be to get your philosophy right, and that's
Yeah.
obviously what I'm about writing about. But in the sort of really general sense, rather than the detail, it's understanding that we're here for the same reason as the trees and the bees and the whales and the snails. We're meant to be here, right? In as much as every other living organism is meant to be here. So we're not imposters. The fundamental distinction between humans and the rest of the living world is that they do their job, right? Where we're not doing our job. The job in this philosophy is to pursue our personal interests in a manner that makes a positive contribution to the well-being of the whole. Every organism, let's just think of a whale for the moment, pursues its life interest, and in so doing, it's cycling nutrients, it's moving carbon, it's a store of carbon. It's participating. Its poo becomes the food for the phytoplankton. Its body eventually becomes the food for the creatures on the seafloor. So every organism is basically doing its job, whereas humans have free will and we're off in all sorts of different directions, and we're doing exactly the opposite. We're unwinding the the greater body through our destructive habits, and so the first thing I get people to do is just to sort of reframe themselves in that broader context, because what that then does is it offers a pathway for right action. And that's really at the heart of the Vita Sapien work and Lifewise philosophy, is to sort of frame the right relationship to the nature, and then it lays out a series of practices that one might engage in order to fill your days with right behavior.
Now, again, taking us back around, religion is something, it's one of those things you're not supposed to talk about, right? And the idea of that is not good, because we need to be exposed to other ideas and things. But if I understand correctly, the religious part of your philosophy, science kind of thing going together, it can work in conjunction with other religions. Am I correct in that? I mean, if you wanted to be a Christian, you could
Yeah.
still subscribe to what you think is a good theory for the earth.
Okay.
Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. So, yeah, absolutely. So my friend in New South Wales has a PhD in forest governance, and he spends his days um, running interference on destructive forest practices, and he's either actually out in the dirt with his boots in front of the bulldozers, or he's sitting in the offices with ministers. He's made a total commitment of his life to protect forests. When he returns home, he walks past a religious icon resting against a tree carved into a piece of marble, and has a deep Christian faith. And I talked to him about this, and I said, "You're a beaten Christian," and he said, "No, I'm a Christian beaten." And so we're still arguing about which is which.
Right.
But the whole concept was, you don't have to stop being a Christian in order to follow this philosophy and become a good citizen with respect to the ecosystem. I'm in Cambodia right now, and over here there is a fusion of Hindu and Buddhist beliefs. In Japan, there is a fusion of Buddhist and Shinto beliefs, and this is called multiple religious belonging, or multiple philosophy belonging, or religious syncretisms, in other words. So it's not uncommon for people to fuse different faiths in order to have a more balanced view of the world.
Guy, in your years of dealing with the environment, are you more optimistic now, more pessimistic, or do you look at young people? That they're always our hope, right? Where do you stand on that question? Is it not asking for
Well,
apocalyptic feelings, but how do you see the world in terms of the
yeah.
environment?
So part of getting your philosophy right, is to have a firm grounding in the proper understanding scientifically of where we are right now. And it is possible that we've actually already passed the major climactic tipping points, which are going to take the planet 6 or 7 degrees above baseline and wipe out most life on Earth, with us in the first tranche. So that may already be the case, but we don't know that. It may also be the case that we've actually got time, if we get our skates on, to actually pull enough carbon out of the atmosphere, restore enough nature, that we can actually stabilize the blood loss of the planet, okay, and then bring her back to full health. So I don't profess to know the future, although I read science papers that try to create scenarios, and we're in a bifurcation. It could go either way, which is even more reason why we need an army of people to actually start getting clear in the head and start acting to pull back the destructive systems of power which are actually taking us over the cliff.
Guy, you had a comment from our audience. We've had a lot of comments, actually. But this user says, this is fascinating. Please go tell Guy thank you. And then also, please tell him that I'm also an environmental scientist and engineer, but left that to grow over 1 million trees a year for my family's third generation nursery. We may soon be at 2 million trees. The vast majority of our trees are native trees. So you have a lot of fans out there. But
Fantastic.
Guy,
Great.
along with what Dave was asking you, you do know, of course, that there is a group of people who think that this is it. There's nothing we can do. You know that we had Guy
Yeah.
McPherson on the Reality Report. I tried to set up a conversation, a dialogue between you and Guy in the past, um, and a lot of people say there's no debate. This thing's going down. I'm not saying they're looking forward to it, but there seems to be this idea that I hope it happens because I said it was going to happen. So I want to prove myself. What do you say to that type of mentality? Well, maybe not that mentality, but the mentality that there's no chance coming back from 1.5 and we're done in a couple of years once we get a blue ocean event.
Yeah. I think that the term that I think is commonly used is doomerism, right?
Right.
Which basically holds that of my two scenarios, it's all over. There's nothing we can do. So just don't waste your time and effort trying to fix anything because it's finished, right? So I think that is actually more of a, a, um, a psychological framing than a rational framing, because some people are just born doomers, and when you look at the data, there is plenty of data to support that evidence.
Right.
Okay, but if you look at the same data, there's also evidence to suggest that we can get out of this mess. So the question is, what is driving what is actually motivating you to believe one thing over the other? And I think that doomers simply just have a particular psychological profile that they're always going to just assume it's ruined, and any evidence to the contrary, they'll just go, well, look at the balance of evidence in the other direction. The problem with doomers is, look, there is precious few people actually having these sorts of conversations. For the most part, Christians aren't having these conversations, right? The more sort of extremist your Christian views, the less likely it is that you're actually going to be caring about the planet. Which is not to say that there isn't a subset of Christians that are deeply passionate. In fact, Catherine Hayhoe, who's a famous climate scientist, is actually a Pentecostal Christian. She speaks openly about her faith and her science. But broadly speaking, if you follow the Christian tradition, you're not going to see yourself as a part of the ecosystem and act as though your body is being infringed upon by climate and ecological collapse. The other Abrahamic religion, with Islam, for example, has got a similar problem. So there's 3 billion people straight away who are not in the fight. Okay, so then you've got your right-wing crazies who, for political reasons, reject the idea that there's a climate problem.
Right.
Okay, so that's another big chunk. Then you've got your doomers. That's another big chunk. And by the time you actually go through all of these chunks of people who are just going, nothing to do with me, right, or not interested, or I don't believe it, or whatever it is, right, there's precious few people left. And what I'm trying to do with my work is I'm trying to reach out to everybody who is out there who feels this, and I'm trying to say to them, it's time to really get on board and lift your game, because we're out of time. If we continue to put 40 gigatons of carbon in the atmosphere, and we just continue to do that year after year for the next 5, 10, 15 years, it's game over. It's game over, right? We know from paleo records that, say, back in the time of the Permian extinction, there was a gas outpouring, a greenhouse gas outpouring from big volcanic eruptions in the Siberian region, which over the period of about 20,000 years heated the planet up about 6 degrees. It killed off life in the ocean. The ocean lost its oxygen. It was too hot. It's stratified, which means there was no further mixing of the surface waters with the deep waters. It grew this hydrogen sulfide-based bacteria, which poisoned the ground further. We lost 90% of life on Earth 230 million years ago. from a greenhouse gas emission on par with what we're doing now. But what we're doing now is 100 times faster. Right? So we know where we're going because we've been in that place on this planet numerous times. And the urgency of the situation cannot be understated. In order for us to actually resolve the issue, we've got to work together as a planet. We've got to bring all the countries along on the journey. And this is why I've been going to the big UN conferences. I went to UN CBD COP 15, which was the biodiversity talks in Montreal in 2022, and I went to COP 28, which is the climate talks in Dubai, hosted by an oil man this year. Okay, and so this we've got to get this stuff sorted, and we can't rely on probably 80% of the world's population. Okay, I mean, if you just frame the West, I normally just talk about the West. Let's ignore the rest of the world for the moment. Within the West, you can't rely on 80% of the adults to help. They either don't have the mental faculty to get their head around it, they don't have the empathy, they've got the wrong religious or spiritual or political views, or they're doomers. Okay, so it leaves a small packet of people. My modelling suggests that there's around 8% of the Western adults are going to be resonant with this message and will adopt Lifewise philosophy as their primary life philosophy that shapes their beliefs moving forward. And that was the very conception of this idea, was to recreate basically a new version of Stoicism. Not to recreate Stoicism, but to recreate a new sustainable life philosophy that could be held by the educated classes in the Western world, to give a common frame of reference, to help us all get a common language and to get all pointing in the right direction. And just to go back for a second, Stoicism is a philosophy of the ancient Greeks. It was founded by a guy called Zeno of Citium about 3,500 years ago, but it came to be the main philosophy held by the educated classes in the Roman period between the end of the Republic and the beginning of the Empire, a time of great economic growth, expansion of territory, political turmoil, exactly the sort of stuff that's going on right now with the clean energy transition. The educated classes had a common philosophy called Stoicism. It's about pursuing eudaimonia, which is effectively living a good life. How do you live a life that's good for you and a life that's good for your society? I'm trying to create the new version of Stoicism with the view that it becomes a philosophy that the educated classes can use as their frame of reference, and in so doing get the power of the numbers to make up for the fact that they might only be a small proportion of the actual overall population. But what we know from the literature around used by the Extinction Rebellion is that you only need a small proportion of the public to be passionately holding a view for it to actually shift society. Now, Extinction Rebellion numbers were saying that none of the non-violent rebellions had failed over the last 200 years when 3.5% of the public were actively involved. And actively doesn't mean they're necessarily on the street or involved in all of the back-end services, right? So my modelling suggests around 8% of the Western adults could adopt a sustainable life philosophy like Lifewise, and that could be what is necessary to tip the system in the right direction.
Yeah, I remember you
Got,
mentioning that the last time we spoke, and that was very helpful to me because, as you know, I speak to a lot of people from Russia. Tomorrow I'll be speaking with them. Today I spoke with them, and most Russians, quite frankly, Guy, and you probably know this, don't really give a damn about climate change. And even if they did believe it was actually occurring in their minds, they see it as something in their minds it's good because it's so cold. What's so
Mm,
bad about being 4 degrees warmer?
mm,
And then I think of China. Well, the Chinese obviously are getting involved with creating alternative energies, but I don't know that the average Chinese citizen actually thinks too much about it. So I guess what you're saying is, I mean, you understand that most of the world isn't consciously thinking, what can I do to help? But you're saying that you've got to have like this meteor, this group of people who can energize it and can actually save the world.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the scale of the problem is so vast. Like you say, I mean, China is like the largest emitter of CO2 gas. Russia, you know, actually, I'll give you a little anecdote. So there's one of the numbers that they use in climate science is called climate sensitivity. It
Mhm.
basically says if you double the CO2 in the atmosphere, how much hotter does it get? And that's still been argued and debated to this day. But the very first time it was plotted was by a Swedish scientist called Svante Arrhenius. And he actually did these calculations by longhand with a pencil and a book. And he came up with the number 4 degrees Celsius, that if you double atmospheric CO2, you'll end up with a planet that's 4 degrees hotter. These are numbers that are consistent with the supercomputer
Right.
modeling. So it's somewhere around that, which is really scary because we're on a pathway to doubling CO2. Um, at the time, this was
Right.
1896 when Svante
They
Arrhenius
didn't have
wrote
the
his book.
benefit, just
Okay,
like Mendeleev. They didn't have the benefit of that information. It
no,
must have been
no, no,
brilliant.
no. Wrote it by hand, right?
Mhm.
Um, he was Swedish, and he says 4 degrees Celsius increase in temperatures sounds good to me. It's freezing over here.
Right.
The problem is, right, the 4 degrees Celsius doesn't mean to say it's going to get 4 degrees warmer at night. That's a global average temperature. And what we know is that the global average temperature is extremely finely balanced. And it's been balanced for billions of years because living organisms have balanced it by sequestering carbon, by releasing carbon, by putting up aerosols that create the clouds to have the albedo effect, which reflects the sunlight to keep the ocean cool, all of these different mechanisms. And what we've done in the last 200 years is we've destabilized the natural systems that maintain the stable climate and keep it within what they call the dynamic equilibrium, the threshold of temperatures, which is nice and steady. Um, 4 degrees global average completely wrecks the whole climatic system of the planet, shifts winds, shifts rain belts, and we've built 12,000 years of agriculture based around a weather system that had broadly hadn't changed that much in 12,000 years,
Mhm.
and now it's going absolutely haywire. So this 4 degrees business needs to be understood in the context of the global average. We're now about 1.3 above pre-industrial baseline
Now,
temperatures,
I'm
and we're
sorry to interrupt. Is
already
that centigrade or Fahrenheit we're talking
that's
about?
Celsius.
Celsius. Okay.
Celsius. Yeah. Okay. And even at 1.3, I mean, like 2023 was just this year of insane weather events. Not necessarily for you personally, which is
Mhm.
again part of the framing that I'm trying to give you. That you need to understand this and globally, but around the world there was just the most insane flash floods and droughts. I mean, there was a whole city taken out in Libya, Dera it was called. Had this massive rain event came in, took out two major dams, killed 20,000 people as the guts of the city were washed out into the Mediterranean. The sea surface temperatures in the North Atlantic are just through the roof. Antarctic sea ice extent has collapsed by about 20%. Canadian wildfires last year,
Right.
absolutely through the roof. So we're already seeing the meltdown of the whole climatic system with just 1.3 degrees increase temperature. And the UN's target is that we get to 2, right? And we're probably heading close to 3.
Right.
And that's not taken into account all the feedbacks, positive feedbacks, which is, for example, as the sea ice contracts, then more of the sunlight penetrates the ocean, doesn't reflect back to space. The ocean gets warm, which melts more ice. And so so this is the concern, the cascade of climate tipping points, the runaway feedback, the runaway greenhouse effect. I mean, these things are all right here, right now. And this is why we need to raise this army of people who are motivated by the most powerful motivator of human action, which is a spiritual bond to something greater. And what I'm trying to do with my work is I'm trying to have them attach that spiritual bond to the living planet of which they are a part, and that serves as their life support system.
Guy, just a question here. A number of religions have a component of human sacrifice. Do you think we'd be better off environmentally if Brian if we could sacrifice Brian, he doesn't have to. We could either sacrifice him or he could self-sacrifice. Do you see that as environmentally sound procedure? I mean, I think it. I think it. I mean, I do, but I don't know about you.
This is actually
Uh,
this is the second time I've been asked about human sacrifice as part of my
really, I don't know. Maybe
philosophy
as
and
stupid as I
religion.
am.
Yeah.
Um, you know,
No, but
no.
no.
Oh, come
Just
on.
yeah, keep it simple. Keep it simple.
Okay,
Haha,
but
Dave.
I think again, we should never uh, judge the whole by what we know. But I think I've run into a number of people who say it doesn't matter because it will be God's will, and that always bothers me. Simply because A, who knows what God's will is? B, if you're Brian, you don't believe there is a God, and there's a number of those people. But it's the parts that get neglected. The Bible also indicates that God wants you to act, and this is the way to do it. I think, but I liked and I forget who put up the comment. Even if you believe doom is there, you can still continue to do something. That's why I think
Yeah.
it's so important.
Yeah.
I think it does get overwhelming. Look, on our regular show, Divided We Stand, we really kind of just acknowledge that the environmental crisis, the changes that we're going through, is over and above everything else, right? I mean, without the
Yeah.
world, you don't have anything else going on. But
Yeah.
politically, okay, there really had, in America, unfortunately, we have we're a two-party system. Uh, we get some independents to run, but it's almost meaningless. And neither one has been stellar, and there's reasons for that. I mean, but I still think that I would encourage people that believe that we're in trouble environmentally to look at any candidate running in your area and find out where they stand. It doesn't mean they can even act on it. I mean, I understand that, but at least their understanding of it, that they're not a U.S. senator who brings a snowball into Congress and says, what global warming? And that's a
Yeah.
fact that
Yeah.
happened. So how do you get to the minds of those people? I mean, your 8% I got, but that is only good if those in charge are listening to that 8%. Is it your hope that it will be the arguments will
Yeah.
just be so convincing that they'll almost be forced, or by the power of truth? Is that kind of the way it works?
Well, the arguments already are so convincing.
Right.
But what is standing in the way of good governance is that we have a powerful economic and political elite on the planet and within each country, which is wedded to a particular form of business, which is growing the global economy based on fossil fuels. This come out of COP28, and what happened at COP28 was Sultan Al Jaber, who is the CEO of the Abu Dhabi National Oil Company, who is the president of the climate talks, has basically just got the world's governments to sign off on allowing the fossil fuel industry to continue doing just what the hell it was doing before the meetings. And there's no real plan to transition away from fossil fuels. There is a plan to increase the amount of renewable energy on the planet 3 times over, which is a good start, but still only a small part of what we need. And there are plans to try and suck carbon out of the atmosphere. And a lot of the people that are putting their hand up to do that are oil companies that have got these depleted oil wells where they can theoretically suck the carbon and pump it underground. Like, the whole thing is thoroughly corrupted. The global elite are insane. And at the heart of the problem, sustainability, the heart of the sustainability problem is not absence of money, it's not access to finance, it is not technology, it's not a deep understanding of the Earth system, it's not that there aren't thousands and millions of people around the world concerned and active. It's a power crisis. It's a crisis of political power. And right now, the wealthiest people in the world are insane. And that's fundamentally the problem. And unless you can figure out a way to shift that, then we're still stuck, right? And this, again, is where the 8% of supercharged individuals comes in to try and puzzle that out. And one of the supercharged individuals out there is Roger Hallam from the Extinction Rebellion movement. And his model was basically saying that if you can get enough people into the capital city, that you can gridlock the capital for 2 weeks by having tens of thousands of people just running interference on the free flow of traffic, for example. That's enough, history shows, to actually foster radical political change. And radical political change is what you need to do in order to shift power away from the insane elite into a different place where the decision making is sensible and rational and in line with an understanding of how the Earth system functions. Now, I don't know how to do that. I don't know how you do that in America. I don't know how you do that in China or Russia. But a part of it comes in from having enough people who are deeply passionate, wise, and connected to be working in the system, looking for the gaps. One of the other aspects of this transition that we need to do is it's going to be really, really, really good for business. Every time in history there is an energy transition, whether it will be from water wheels to coal, or from coal to oil and oil to gas, or the beginning of nuclear, there is a massive expansion in economic activity. And that's basically been held back right now because the fossil fuel industry is still dominant in the world. They produce around 80% of the world's energy, and they don't want to let go of that. And they're thinking, and if you listen to some of the CEOs talk about the future, they're saying that they'll still be producing 80% of the world's energy in 20 or 30 years' time. And they're effectively signing the death warrant, not only of the human race, but most life on Earth as a result.
Guy, in a few minutes, we'll be switching to the politics. So, A, thank you for being with us. You're welcome to stay around and listen to Brian's inane comments if you want to. But
Okay, Dad.
bring us back. Divided we stand, Brian and I kind of in agreement that, you don't get the perfect, you have to be practical, and you get what you get. If you were advising Americans based on what you know of Joe Biden, President Biden, and what you know of Donald Trump, speaking environmentally only, which is your area of expertise, would you suggest that they choose one over the other? And if so, whom would that be?
Oh, if you had the choice between Joe Biden and Donald Trump, I mean, Donald Trump is a disease of the human race, and so go for Biden, I would say. With that said, Biden needs to actually really stand up and lead with respect to climate. I mean, we need the United States. The United States is still the leader. It's still the dominant nation in the world, and the Inflation Reduction Act has done a lot of really good stuff. But they've got to really start winding back the fossil fuel industry and make a really clear statement that it's over. The fossil fuel industry is over, and we need an orderly transition into extremely disciplined use of energy, and then sustainable energy to replace that we still need. And we can do that. We've got all the machines, we've got all the finance, we've got everything we need, but we don't have the powerful people at the top actually pulling in that direction. Now, the American presidency doesn't seem to have as much power as the combined weight of the fossil fuel lobby in the US.
Correct.
But this is where your smart people come in to try and puzzle out how to fix the thing. And right now, the fossil fuel industry is coming under assault from all different directions, whether it be, there is a protest going on in Holland where the Extinction Rebellion activists have blocked the A12 leading into the capital. And the specific call is to end fossil fuel subsidies, which are in the tune of about 40 billion euros a year from the Dutch government. Okay, so that's one approach. There's all of these lawsuits going against fossil fuel companies because they knew of the crisis that was coming back in the 70s and maybe even back in the 50s, because the science was really basic and clear, and they engaged scientists to do the work. So eventually we've all just got to fight this evil industry and get it off the planet, because it's rerunning the Permian extinction 1,000 times faster.
Guy, if people want to get a hold of you, because we've had a nice crowd tonight watching, if they want to get a hold of you, where can they reach you?
So vitasapien.org, vitasapien.org. That's the website. It's all there, including an early version of the Lifewise philosophy book that you can get as a PDF.
And I'd be remiss not to ask you, because I remember you have is it the verdant pendant there? That's not a Quen, is it?
This is a Quen. So
it is a Quen. Okay.
Pendant. Yeah. Like that. Yeah. So this
Perfect.
is you can read about it on the website, but it's a powerful environmental symbol, and it's just an icon of jewelry. And we make a bit of money if we sell these, and so and the people comment about them. I get comments all the time that people go, "Oh, that's really interesting." And you've got this, it's got a magnetic clasp. You just sort of pop it off, and
Hmm. Gotcha.
and people's eyes go like, "Whoa, what's that all about?" So it creates it's a way of creating a conversation with a stranger about climate and ecological issues by wearing a Quinn pendant, and you can buy them through the website.
Okay, so you have the website there, and will you be having a YouTube channel also?
Yeah, there's a Vita Sapien YouTube channel,
Hmm.
and a Facebook group that goes by the name Perium, Perium, and also a Guy Lane Twitter.